everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speak, Film, and Enter, a podcast where we review and rank movies. I'm Nate.
And I'm Dylan.
And I'm Adam.
Today, we are reviewing the new Netflix war epic, German adaptation of All Quiet on the Western Front.
Yes.
Adam, would you like to tell the people what it's about if they are unfamiliar with this classic story?
A young German soldier's terrifying experiences and distress on the Western Front during World War I.
So yeah, it seems kind of, it feels appropriate that this is getting remade now. I think this is the first German film adaptation of this that we've gotten. But after 1917, it feels like World War I has been a little bit more, people have been making more movies about it and exploring just the horrors of World War I. I think it's kind of generally accepted that it's like one of the absolute dumbest wars in world history.
Yeah, and one of the worst like atrocities, I guess we'll call it, as
for
far
sure.
as civilization's concerned.
Yeah, just the waste of life when you're talking about trench warfare and how little was gained for how much was given up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely not as, World War II seems to have much more compelling storylines and stakes and everything. And World War I is just a unnecessary bloodbath, so it doesn't.
World War II is more like
in the film
classic good versus evil. Like those
people
are
how many
terrible.
World War II movies there are.
Yeah, I mean, look at the 90s.
Like, as a narrative.
Yeah.
World War I is like most people, I think if you ask them, couldn't even really tell you what it was fought over other than just like weird alliances triggering and people fighting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like what kind of, who was bad, who was good, what were the end goals, and like what was anybody actually trying to accomplish are kind of just elusive to a lot of people. And that's not necessary. That's not even really something that this movie gets into. Because it is from the perspective of a private in the German army, just on the front lines, who has bought into his country's propaganda, where
line and sinker.
They make it sound amazing and go have an adventure, and you'll be in Paris in 3 weeks, and we'll win the war.
Mm-hmm.
And then flash forward 2 years later, and they've moved about 18 feet forward.
Yeah, and lost thousands and thousands and thousands of men.
Yes, absolutely. So I think this is going to be an interesting episode because we don't run into too many movies where one of us or two of us are greatly disagreeing from the other two.
Yeah. I do want to preface a few things, not based on what we think our star ratings and stuff are, but did any of you guys, or did either of you guys read this book at all, ever?
Yeah, that's good. I never read the book. I haven't seen either of the other versions of the movie, so I don't know this story. Didn't know this story at all going into this movie.
Okay. And Dylan, you shook your head. And you had
neither. No, I've seen the original. I've seen the movie from the 30s, but I have not seen or read the book.
I don't remember which version I saw, but we read this book in high school, and then we watched one of the movies. I'm assuming the more recent one that was 79, I think it was.
I don't know. The 30s one gets a lot more well known, I feel like.
Okay, yeah, I don't remember which one we watched, but I know we watched it after we read the book because it was we had basically like a unit on this. So I'm more familiar with the book than either of you guys are. So that might play in, but it's a fantastic book. If you haven't read it, and anybody who's listening or watching, like like definitely go check it out. The themes and stuff are great, and it's worth exploring. But with that said.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess should we start with what we liked about it?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely can do that. I guess I wanted to start with, because this movie made me think of it, because this is going into it ostensibly an anti-war film, and I think it attempts to do that, and the story for sure is going for that. There's a quote from Francois Truffaut, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, the director of the 400 Blows, like a big director in the French New Wave, who has a quote about how it's virtually impossible to make an actual anti-war film because inevitably you're going to make a scene with a battle and it's going to get the audience excited, and whatever scene that is going to in some way make you want somebody to fight back and be violent in response to violence.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that a lot while watching this movie, and I think it's safe to say that I liked it less than both of you guys. If you wanted to start with the things that we liked, one of you guys I think can go first, but I wanted to throw that quote out there because I thought a lot about it while watching this movie, because I think that's what this movie was going for. And yeah, we can pick up back
I
up
mean,
on
I
that
think
one.
that's what this movie was going for, and I think it pulled it off because the story for the actual characters was about it, and I felt like almost always the violence was depicted in like a "this is awful" tone. Like maybe I
Right.
would say, besides maybe like the very end, I feel like for the most part you aren't going into it thinking of like good guys and bad guys. I mean, maybe that's also because it's the German soldiers, so like, you're
You're
trained
used
to
to them
look at
being
them as the
bad.
bad guys. So when the story is about the Germans, it's like, well, then there's no there's no like the war is just bad all around, and it's just like terrible that these boys are even going through this. Um, I thought that even though it was predictable, like in the sense of like I knew where it was going to end up from the very beginning, and like once I saw that it was definitely going for like a very anti-war, like war is hell message, I felt like, okay, well then I know kind of where this is going. So it was predictable, but I still felt like even the predictable parts were well done and well executed. Like, I had an idea of who was going to die and whatnot. And then it was like, oh, here comes this person's death scene. And then I was like, that was pretty well done. Like, I don't know. I guess, it didn't blow me away, but I liked, it felt fresh. I liked it all the way through. And then, it just looks absolutely gorgeous. And so, even though it is a little long, I didn't mind because it's just like one long, beautiful shot after another beautiful shot for like 2.5 hours. So it was visually delightful, and I felt like it was pretty well written and well executed, even though I kind of knew where it was going from the beginning.
Yeah, this is where I think I'm just going to end up just being biased this whole episode because of my familiarity with the book and knowing the source material and knowing like what's supposed to happen and why it was written and everything about that. And like, this isn't good versus bad as we've come to believe about war. It's people experiencing insanely traumatic events through no real reason of their own. They didn't create this war. It's just the people participating. And it's always the contrast in this movie of like the German high command meeting with the French high command to negotiate the armistice. And then you have all the soldiers in the mud and rats and dirt and bombs and blood and gore and just everything, like literal hell on earth is the trench warfare and no man's land. It's always about the futility of war, and the people that have to that are in war aren't the people that should be. The major part of the book that I remember is the scene towards the end with the French soldier in the same foxhole. That's the part that really stuck with me, and that like it does like that he looks exactly like me. Why is he my enemy? Is the entire basis. So I think at every turn, this movie like punched you in the face with that and reiterated that kind of theme to you. And I love it. I mean, I'm fairly anti-war. I guess
Agreed.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think we should be at war, but
we
you
can
understand
quote you on that,
right? Like, you understand why like nations do these things and all that kind of stuff. But like, we're still in the same position. Like, nothing has changed since World War I to now. We're still getting involved in needless wars over stupid shit or over resources, which you could consider stupid shit from time to time. It's just that has not gone away, and this message will persist throughout history as long as that type of stuff continues to happen. So,
yeah, I think for me, the most effective parts of this were just the way that it's shot and how it looks, and just the way the battle sequences are done. I mean, this movie is technically, I think, very, very well done. There are a lot of really great shots, especially in some of the quieter moments when they're just kind of staying in a barn, like holding the line in this rough area, and they don't really have anything to do. And there's some good moments there. For me, my issues just kind of stem from sort of back to Dylan's, where I get like the familiarity, I think, just bothered me more than it bothered you, where I felt like I was just watching a collection of scenes from other movies that I've already seen before or miniseries that I've already seen before. The message of war is hell and war is
Mhm.
bad and it's stupid and unfair to just your average citizen is something that wasn't really new to me. It didn't feel fresh.
Mhm.
And for me, at least, if that's the focus of this story, I felt like I was disappointed by the lack of actual focus on character. We're just
Mhm.
kind of told we're supposed to feel for this guy because I think he's just supposed to be a stand-in for the audience with this idea that, hey, this could have been me, which is effective to a certain degree, but with the length of the movie being at 2.5 hours, and we never really get to know any of these people beyond like, this is my buddy because we were friends in this 3-minute scene before the war started or before we went to war. I found I had difficulty connecting to them. And then if the story is going to focus so much on that, I wanted, and I know this isn't part of the book, but I feel like if you're going to have the character just be a stand-in for the audience, then I would have wanted to see a little bit more on the French side as well. Whereas the French are outside of like one scene just depicted as monsters in this movie. And I feel like that's mostly just because that's Paul, our main character's perspective, and that's who he's fighting. But it's kind of echoed as well in the scenes on the train with the negotiations for a surrender,
For a ceasefire.
and kind of the hinting at like what gets blamed for causing World War II and like Hitler's rise to power. So it felt a little bit, I don't know, that element of it, the character stuff just kind of missed for me, and the technical brilliance wasn't enough to carry me for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I'll agree with you that like that the beginning scenes when we're supposed to like meet all the friends and like understand who everybody is, like that doesn't last long enough to really even like remember what everybody's face looks like until like middle of the movie. You're like, oh, they've said his name again. Like that's who that is.
Well, we only hear about his parents.
Yeah,
our main
that's what
characters.
I mean. Like that scene didn't necessarily need to be longer, but I feel like there are a lot of moments where we just kind of spend with them, not always in battle, and I feel like there's some wasted opportunity to actually learn more about who these guys are, other than it's the main guy's friend, so it's sad that he's getting shot at. Like,
yeah, and I think again that's where like I feel like I maybe didn't view this as like I didn't judge this as harshly of a movie or as a movie as I would for maybe something else that I wasn't familiar with, because I knew that was kind of the point going in. Like you're not supposed to truly care. Like it's supposed to be anybody. You could be the soldier that dies. You could be the soldier that lives. You could be, like you are everybody in that group of friends. And that's why it's telling you like everything is precious, and like he's going into war and hating the enemy, the French, because he bought into all of the propaganda that his government told him about, and like he fully believes all of it. And then once he finally gets there, he realizes that's completely false, and all of that just falls down around him. And then he's obviously in this horrible situation. So I feel bad because I'm like, I definitely feel like I didn't view this as I kind of should have. But
no, I mean, if you read the book and like the book and then like the adaptation, that's a perspective I don't have, and that's a good thing.
That's fair.
I mean, I felt like it did a good job of putting us in like the main character's shoes, because like, even though we never got scenes with, Kat and his family or like any of the other guys and their family, just the fact that they were familiar faces amidst all the chaos and the death and stuff did feel like every time that I saw one of them, I did start to like care for them a lot. And like, the stuff with Kat at the end, like, even though I've never met his family, I've just, amongst all this, he's like been a friendly face. So now it's like, I just have that attachment to him. Like, I thought the guy who portrayed him did really well, considering we don't get a lot of background. And a lot of it is just like, well, we got to get the audience to like me, like you would get your fellow soldiers who you've never met before to like me and to trust me. Like, and I really loved, like the stuff with them running through the field and the scenes where they're stealing the goose. Like, I like those because they were kind of peaceful, but also kind of, it's felt like it was removed from the rest of the war, especially the second one with the snow on the ground and everything. I love that.
That looked amazing.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. That was like a bunch of great shots. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just one of those, like, it feels like this whole thing it's all to make a point. It's all like a metaphor almost. Like each character is just like supposed to represent like an idea more than like an actual fictional character.
Yeah, that embody
that. Yeah, right. Like, and so it didn't bother me as much. I mean, the things that hold this movie back for me are the length, certainly a little too long, and I didn't feel like I felt like I got what they were going for with the scenes, the diplomatic scenes on the train and what's going on like at the high command during this, but it wasn't enough and it wasn't like effectively done enough. I mean, can compare that. It felt like it was trying to get a little bit of like paths of glory in there, but it's just like wasn't as well executed of just like, the idea of that these decisions from these people who aren't really aware of how horrible it is are directly affecting the people on the ground. Like, I don't know. So I liked what it was going for, but the diplomatic scenes just fell a little flat for me.
Yeah, and I think for me, that kind of goes with, I guess, my issue where I felt like we're half an hour in and our main character has now realized that the war sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gotten an idea of the different sides of kind of the diplomatic negotiations and kind of who sucks here and who's actually fighting for people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost like the entire story. And I just kind of felt like, okay, we've had our arc at the 40-minute mark of a 2.5-hour movie, and now we're still just here.
Yep.
And that
stuck in the war.
Stuck in the war, stuck in the mud, stuck doing the shit jobs, the all of it. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you 100%. It's the majority of this movie is a fucking slog. And it's just, it never gets easier or better, or nothing really ever goes right as it progresses, and it just continues to just devolve.
And even though the final battle is really well shot and definitely like has a purpose, and I like that as the climactic event of the movie, it just felt like because the movie was so long and we've seen so much battles, like, I mean, it put me in his shoes where I was like, oh my God, like again. But then I was also just as a viewer, I was just like, I don't know if I have room for another battle just because you've already, it felt like a little like they could have cut one earlier in the movie, trimmed the movie up a bit, and then that might have hit better for me. I mean, like I said, I still really like where everything ended up, and I like that as like the end of the movie moment and stuff. But by that I was just so exhausted. I had fatigue.
Yeah.
Which again,
I still really liked it. I mean, I was very engaged for the entire movie. When I started it, Netflix had the audacity to think that I would want the dubbed version. And
oh God,
I was like, no, Netflix, who are you talking to here? I will go with German as it was intended, and I will read the subtitles.
Yeah. As long as we're talking about things that we like, then I know we've kind of jumped around. I like that it's in German because this could not have been an American made movie. This could not have been anybody.
They've done that already.
Exactly. Yeah. But this could not have been anybody else's story than a German's perspective on the war, and what they lost and why they were there and all that stuff. So I thought that was really cool. And the other aspect I liked is there's not, all things considered, there's really not that much dialogue in this movie. A lot of it is quiet. It's just the sounds of war, the gunfire, the explosions.
Or nature.
The mud slapping as you're trying to run through the trenches, and the sound of the bolt on the rifle. It's all the sound. It's not necessarily the dialogue of what's going on, because the dialogue's not that important.
And then I also just wanted to touch on the performances, mostly like I already mentioned. Albrecht Schuch, I don't know, as Cat. Yeah, he was fantastic and just had like a natural charisma and just a good guy vibe. And I was digging him. And then the star, who's been getting a lot of fanfare and attention for this. This is his first major role ever. Felix Kammerer, who plays the main character Paul. I mean, I thought he was great. I thought he was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
Like I was like, okay, this guy's going to be showing up in a lot of other things, because his facial expressions and just the way that he was able to portray being worn down as the movie went on. I mean, it's just like the life you saw it just slowly just get sucked out of him by this war. And I just thought he was really good. Really, really kudos to him.
Agreed.
Yeah. You guys got anything else, or you want to get into the stars?
I think we can get into the stars.
Take it. We'll be right back.
All right.
All right. Who would like to go first? Do you want to end high? Do you want to start high? Like,
let's start from the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go first.
Right. Okay. Yep. Take it away.
I'm gonna give this a 2.5 out of 5. It's just not my type of thing, really, where the lack of focus on character combined with the length just kind of made it a bit of a slog for me. I felt like 30 minutes in, like we've seen stories like this about World War I, about lots of other wars, just about the futility of it. I mean, we even saw I thought it was basically as effective in the first Wonder Woman movie for how poorly the higher ups are treating the grunts, and they just view them as soldiers die. That's what they do. So I feel like the themes of this just felt very, very familiar, but it's technically brilliant and amazing to look at for the entire movie. So I didn't feel like it was a total waste or anything, but it definitely, because of those reasons, did not meet the high expectations that I had.
All right. Yeah. I'll go next. I did like this quite a bit. I'm going to give it a 3.5. When it ended, I was definitely leaning towards a 4, but as I've gotten away from it for a few days, I kind of realized, that how little original it had to say, and also just that it was a little too long, and that last battle I'm a little tired. I was a little tired by then, but also I like the familiarity when it's done. So when it's done well, and it felt like this was a finely crafted movie that had very familiar structure and familiar characters and message, but sometimes it's just like a big old cozy sweater. It's like, okay, oh, I don't mind this. I actually like this. It kind of reminded me of when I watched that what's the Churchill movie with Gary Oldman that you don't like.
Oh, Darkest Hour,
where I was just
movie.
As
soon as Gary Oldman came in, I was like, well, that probably sucks. So
yeah, it was just so familiar, and so just kind of it sucked me in, even though I knew that it was simple, and I don't know, I liked the simplicity of it, and the fact that I caught what the message was. I was vibing with the message, and then it looked so nice, and I really liked where it ended up. So I'm gonna, like I said, 3.5, 4. I'm gonna stick with the 3.5 for now. I really liked it, and I think it's very good.
Yeah. So I'm obviously a little bit higher than either of you guys. I'm giving this a 4. In, I guess, response, I don't feel like I have to defend this movie, but in response to,
most people seem to agree with you, we should say. So
that's fair. In response to where all these themes feel familiar and stuff like that, I read this book in high school, and this was kind of the first time I had heard the war is hell, or had gotten this is the father of all of those thoughts in a lot of popular media. This was the thing that defined that. So all of those things, it came from here. So it's hard to say it's derivative of those things. Yeah, to me, it's exactly it nails everything in a much better way than the quick scene in Wonder Woman, a comic book movie that says oh yeah, soldiers die. It's this is also the first modern war where we really got to see on a large scale how truly horrible the weapons of war can be and what humans will do to each other. I mean, mustard gas was used all the time in World War One, and it was used in this movie, and it's just the absolute atrocities that were committed. So that's where all of that stuff, it's born out of this book, this story for me. So
totally fair.
And I thought they did it very well. The other thing I wanted to say is I sat with this after it was over, and I mean I brushed up on the book as well because it's been since high school. But do you know where this movie gets its name, or the story gets its name?
No,
So I don't know if I should spoil anything. I mean, it's not really a spoiler, is it, if we talk about the very end?
I mean, maybe okay. Not. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of,
well, basically
it's also a horror movie, so
yeah.
It's also
so
a lot of people die of a movie. The first one came out in the 30s.
Yeah. All right. So in that case,
I mean, we can say we're at the end of the episode too. You're gonna spoil
we're at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what our stars were. If you don't want to hear the spoilerish thing, it was. Thank you for listening.
The movie gets its name because at the end of the book, or the story gets its name because at the end of the book, there's a day that's very, very close to the end of the war. The armistice is in the middle of being signed, and there's very little fighting. Paul is killed. And the report over the radio for that day is just all quiet on the Western Front. Nothing of importance has happened. It doesn't matter. A man dying is not a tragedy. It's just another day. And that
I would love it. Would have loved if they had included that in this movie.
Well, and that's yeah. But I guess they just didn't want to be too overt. Whatever. That's where the book has so much more of like an emotional tug. But that's why knowing that and then getting this is so much more of like a wealth of emotion. That ending scene where
I do still want to read the book,
and I did like the ending.
Yeah, the ending to me, was fantastic without that knowledge of all that context. So I absolutely loved it. I can't wait to watch it again, even though it's 2.5 hours of just mud and sadness and gray.
And also, when he asks the other guy how much time is left or how much time till 11, he says 15 minutes. There's like 15 minutes left in the movie, so it's always fun when movies do that. Yeah. That's always a good time. No, I thought that would have, I like that as a fact. And like we were saying, Nate, there weren't maybe enough scenes. If there would have been room for a scene or two of his family or his mom at home, it could have been little scene at the beginning with him and his mom at home listening to the radio, and then little scene at the end with his mom listening to the radio, and they're like, all quiet on the Western Front. Yeah. Boom, that's the movie. Boom.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, maybe they thought it was too on the nose. Who knows? But like, I mean, I think that's a great addition. But that's also the American perspective. So I don't know. It's high on Netflix right now. It's in the top 10. So
I think it's definitely going to get love for how it looks, and the classic war movie epic.
I think it's Germany's submission for best international feature at the Oscars.
Good, I hope so.
I believe so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, unless there's anything else, is it my turn to put a wrap on the show?
It is.
All right. Ideals are peaceful. History is violent.